What about in terms of writing practices? How did you figure that out?
So, I mean, that's something that's, I think, also a lot of experimentation. And I've kind of always started from what specifically we're doing in the race and just really trying to work on that. So it's a fairly simple way of doing that. I mean, basically, I think of it as a pyramid, and we all kind of think of that regularly in terms of traditional swimming thing. Is like the base is the bottom of the pyramid, and we go up, and the peak is the top of the pyramid. That's really how I think about it. And the top is the competitive event, the things that we're racing in, and then you get less and less specific as you go. And instead of thinking of starting from the base and growing all the way up, I kind of think of you're doing both at the same time. You're trying to increase the base in terms of just your general skills while increasing the peak of that competitive event at the same time. So that's something I think you have to be at pretty high form 52 weeks a year to really get better, especially at sprinting.
Let me see this. Is this the one you're talking about?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, you sent that to me, and I think if people want to check this out, it's on your Twitter. So, and again,
yeah,
you have one of the best Twitters, swimming Twitters in the world. You put amazing stuff up, but in terms of what we're talking about right now, this graph here, you can find that on Herbie's Twitter and download it, which I did. I just pulled it off there, and yeah, good stuff.
So,
I like that.
Yeah, I'll kind of walk through that specifically because honestly, that helps me organize things in terms of training all the time. So,
okay, yep.
For those listening, it's a pyramid that's basically divided into 4 parts, where the top is the competitive exercise or the competitive event, and that's straightforward. If that's swimming, that's 100 freestyle. And then below that is a specific developmental exercise. And that means it's either, well, it's replicating the movement of the competitive event as well as training the physiological systems of the event. So basically in swimming, you're swimming the stroke and speed and working the physiological system. So that's something that's very specific, and not much individuality can be done in that just because it has to be very like the event. Then below that, we have specific preparatory exercises, and that's basically training the movement or the physiological system separately, so not at the same time. That's the bulk of what we really do in training. And then below that is general preparatory exercises, and that's just general movements that we do, like warm up, warm down, weightlifting, anything totally not similar to swimming that's important, but not having super high degree of transfer is what we're doing. And basically it's the amount of relevancy to the competitive event is what's going to have the most specific transfer for the race. And I think the thing that a lot of people have been led astray on, and I think a big part of that is like USRPT, to where it's saying that we basically only want to do the specific developmental exercises. And that's important, but it's not the whole puzzle. And in terms of overloading and teaching, it's kind of inversely correlated, to where the less specific something is, the more overload that can have on the competitive event. And vice versa. If you're doing something that's really similar to 100 freestyle, then there's going to be very little overload and very little learning that can occur, because it's just kind of the same thing. And I think you kind of have to go cyclically through that, to where you're working all ends of the spectrum. In my opinion, I think it needs to be in a part of every single week, because if you go too long without doing any of that specific developmental stuff, you're not figuring out, you're not like putting the pieces together. Mm-hmm. So I think you've got to do all of it all the time. So those specific developmental exercises is stuff that we track, I mean, almost every week for the whole year. And it's that's, I think, probably the coolest thing that I found in my coaching. And I think if you track it, you can, like, it predicts what they're going to go to within a couple tenths.
Give me some examples of what you're tracking the whole year.
So, I mean, kind of the core is 50s on 2 minutes and variations of that. And this is specifically for the 100. So we'll start with just testing like 4 50s on 2 minutes. And then every week kind of try and make a change to that, to where they're swimming the speed of that, either longer or trying to go faster or a different way of doing it. But it changes every single week. And that's, I mean, been pretty cool, where it kind of is the just normal periodization model where the volume of that goes up, it gets harder and harder. And then as we go down and we get closer to the meet, it gets easier and easier, and they're trying to go faster and faster. But basically every week we're trying to take a step forward in either the amount that you're doing with that or the speed in which you're swimming it.
So let me get this straight then. Maybe you'd start with 4 50s on 2 minutes, and then as the weeks progress, you might go 6, 8, 10. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Or not?
So that's actually kind of how I used to do it, super linear, just like that, and keep it pretty simple there. But what I found is it's not really necessary to do that. We used to go all the way up to like 16 50s on 2 minutes, trying to hold the same speed that we did hold for 4 all the way to 16. And I mean, I've honestly found that that's kind of unnecessary. And by that pyramids model, it's no longer the energy, like the 16 50s on 2 minutes. That's a 32-minute set. That's not that similar to a 100-yard freestyle, especially for guys with 41 seconds. Like, it's just overkill.
Yep.
So instead of doing that, we'll kind of see how they do and then change it in a different way. So it'll be, I mean, we've done it to where it's like 1 on 2 minutes, 2 on 1 minute. We've done some where, and it's based on the individual. So if they're struggling if their top speed isn't there, but they're closing really well, then we'll almost always go on the side of speed. So we might go 4 50s on 4 minutes. Or start really.
When do you make an adjustment like that? Are you making that adjustment on the spot, or days before, or when?
No, it's days before. It's kind of the feedback from how the set goes the previous week.
Gotcha.
And if we go, let's say we do 8 50s on 2 minutes and they're lights out the whole way, then it's like, okay, their back half's probably going to be pretty good. So we can start working the front half now. And we kind of add constraints based on the individual. I mean, like, we did one set the other day with a couple of our 100 fly guys where it was 12 on 2 minutes, one with fins where they had to kick past 15 underwater each direction, one without fins, one easy. So they're going into it, that fast 50 with pretty tired legs, like the way it is for a 100 fly. We did a similar one with actually last week, where it was just 3 basically broken 100s. It was 2 25s on 30, a 50 fast on about 8 minutes the whole round. But it had to be no breath the first 2 25s. So they're actually having to figure out how to take that breath efficiently and go as fast as they can on the 50 while their lungs are pretty dead. Just because, I mean, part of that was because Ryan Held at the World Championships, his first 25, his length was pretty amazing. I mean, he kicks out to 15 and he was holding a ton of water, and he only took 7 strokes the first 25 and 7 or 8 strokes the first 25 short course meters. So he only got 1 breath in. So it's like, oh man, we didn't really prepare him for that by not having enough breath control. And just he kind of became more efficient to where he'd normally take 9 strokes and he could take 2 breaths comfortably, but he was out so fast that it was like you got to think on the fly. And I think it was the right call to not try and sneak another breath in there just because his stroke looked so good. So it's kind of preparing them for what might happen in the race. And I guess to clarify on that, it's also, if the speed isn't there, the speed is always number 1. So if they can only do 3 50s at their 100 speed, then we kind of have to make sure the speed is there and start making it to where they can do the volume. And then once the volume's there, and for me, it's like 6 to 8 at the most 50s you'll really need in a practice to be similar to a 100. And that's like in really one set. More than that, is overkill.
I like that a lot. I know the answer to this question for me personally. I think you're going to pretty much say the same thing, but why not? Why do 50s? Why not do 100s?
I think you're just going too slow.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you can, and it's just training something different. Like, because you're not going to be able to go. I mean, we're asking these guys to try and figure out how to swim 41 seconds in 100 yards. They're at the best going to go 44 if we go more than one of them in a practice. So,
yep.
Especially in a college season where you're already racing fairly often, you don't really need to do more 100s. And it's not to say we don't ever do 100 continuously in practice, but when we do that, it normally has a different emphasis where it's kind of strong technique, like hitting the details for 4 laps in a row. But I just don't think you need to. I think the 100s are great for 200s and above, but for 100, it's way too much.
Yeah, I'm totally on the same page with you on that one. I think you need to be at the speed that you want to be racing at, or as close as possible. You're right. And when you stretch it out to the full length of the race, you just can't get anywhere near that pace and speed. And so you're dealing with something completely different.